This story is about a wealthy financier based out of Palm Beach that several years ago, in 2008, served about a year or so for abusing and soliciting underage girls. That attorney represented some of those victims. And then it gets really weird. So we want to bring in Major Garrett. He's standing by at the White House right now because that's the only thing I could say, Major, because it's super complicated. Jeffrey Epstein is the financier. He served time for abusing underage girls. He then sued the attorney representing some of those victims. Why does anybody care about a 2008 case? Well, because there's a connection to some really powerful people.
There is. Alex Acosta is the current Trump administration labor secretary. He was the U.S. attorney with jurisdiction over this case and was deeply involved in the plea arrangement that you just summarized, 13 months in county jail for Jeffrey Epstein. And in part of that plea agreement, and the attorneys were referring to this a few moments ago, there was a shutting down, essentially, of an FBI investigation into what could have been evidence of either trafficking or more numerous instances of abusing underage girls. And this lawsuit has now been settled in favor of Bradley Edwards, the attorney we mostly heard from there, with Jeffrey Epstein admitting in public that all of the things he said about Bradley Edwards and his underlying clients, accusing them of making up stories and alleging things that were false, were themselves untrue. So Bradley Edwards, the attorney on behalf of these clients who allege, in some cases, far more numerous and more criminal activities than Jeffrey Epstein ever pled to, now admits those accusations were false. So the victims now have a chance to have their day in court, have their allegations aired more fairly, and in Congress, more than a dozen lawmakers have written a letter to the Department of Justice Inspector General asking for an inquiry in why Alex Acosta, then the U.S. attorney, now labor secretary for the Trump administration, agreed to this lenient plea deal and an effective shutting down of an FBI investigation that could have revealed more crimes, more trafficking, more nefarious activity that could have been, and from the point of view of Bradley Edwards, that attorney and his victims should have been, A, investigated and quite possibly prosecuted. Why did that plea agreement arise? Why did Alex Acosta okay it? And what were the things that the public were not told or the rights of those who had been victimized denied? All of that now is playing out on a much more public stage. And Alex Acosta, for some period of time before the story that led to this development legally today broke about a week ago in the Miami Herald, Alex Acosta was somewhere on the list of those President Trump was at least considering to replace Jeff Sessions as the next Attorney General. I've been told by those close to the process that after that story broke in the Miami Herald about a week ago about this plea arrangement, Alex Acosta's name fell off that list.
Major, as Anne-Marie pointed out, the very rich and powerful are part of this story, including a former president, Bill Clinton. What is Mr. Epstein's connection to former President Bill Clinton, and how well, given that it's in Palm Beach, does he know the current president, Donald Trump?
So I don't want to get too far out of my repertorial abilities here. This is not a story I have followed closely. They are associated by name, and I believe they've traveled together, Jeffrey Epstein and former President Bill Clinton. I have no clue whatsoever how well Jeffrey Epstein knew or didn't know Donald Trump, either before he was president or as president. I do know in general, and I mean in a very general sense, having been down to Palm Beach a lot in and around the Trump story, both campaign and presidency, that a lot of people who are well-heeled and wealthy tend to know one another, bump into each other at the same places. That's a general impression. I don't have any specific information about times or places or whether or not they know each other very well at all. Perhaps that's well known, well established. I just may not know about it. That's entirely possible. What does matter here, and what I think is important, is that there's a member of the Trump cabinet who has a history with this case, a history and a case that's now taken a completely different turn. And this administration has gone out of its way to talk about its concern over and its incredible focus from a law enforcement perspective on the underlying issue of human trafficking. The president talks about it a lot. The vice president talks about it a lot. When immigration is raised as a priority for this administration, not only is drug trafficking, but human trafficking is frequently mentioned as one of the most negative consequences of uncontrolled or perceived to be uncontrolled borders. Alex Acosta's role in this case is now becoming a legal matter, and it could become a political matter, not just taking him off the list of attorney general. It could jeopardize his continued tenure as labor secretary.
All right, Major, thanks for bringing us up to speed on that. So that was